Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first ever e nutrition conclave on the NutriNest platform under the theme Unity with Immunity, powered by Nestle Health Science. My name is Dr. Nikhil Bangale, Medical Affairs Nestle Health Science, and I welcome all of you for this first ever nutrition conclave. Thank you so much for the audience for joining us. And as I see only more number of people joining. And thank you so much for taking out time and being part of this initiative. It gives me immense pride and pleasure to introduce and invite our esteemed guests and panelists for today. To start up, let me introduce Dr. Pradeep Chaube. Sir is Chairman Institute of Minimal Access, Metabolic and Bariatric Surgery and Chairman Surgery and Allied Specialties at the Max Healthcare, New Delhi. Sir is Honorary Surgeon for the President of India, Honorary Surgeon for Armed Forces of Medical Services, and Surgeon to His Holiness Dalai Lama. He has also been awarded the very prestigious Padma Shri by the President of India in 2002 for his dedication and service in the field of minimal access surgery. Next, let me introduce our moderator, Dr. Nandakishore Dukkapatti. Sir is Clinical Director and Chief Surgeon at KIMS Live Life and Managing Director at Live Life Hospitals in Hyderabad. He is a highly regarded bariatric and metabolic surgeon with over 5,000 bariatric surgeries to his name. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Next, our three panelists. First, Dr. Bhuvneshwari Shankar. She is a senior consultant clinical dietitian at Apollo Hospital and Utopian Diet Clinic in Chennai. Dr. Radha Reddy Chadda, Chief Consulting Clinical Dietitian at Sunshine Hospitals in Secunderabad. And Ms. Ritika Samadar. She is the Regional Head, Department of Clinical Nutrition and Dietetics at Max Healthcare in Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us. And before we start, once again, I would like to put forth sincere thanks to our panelists, to our chief guest, to the audience, to the moderator on behalf of our cluster business head, South Asia, Mr. Abdul Hanan, and the entire Nestle Health Science team. Thank you so much for taking out time and joining us. So, without much ado, let me then hand over it to Dr. Pradeep Chaube to start the proceedings. Sir, I know it's been a pretty busy schedule for you, but thank you so much for taking time out and gracing this occasion and this initiative. Over to you, sir. Thank you so much.
Hello and good evening to everyone. I hope you all are staying safe within the Lakshman Rekha of your home. These are one testing times and we all are in this together. We are united and nurturing the spirit of together we can and we will. It's my pleasure to be part of this rendezvous hosted by Nestle Health Science, which deserves congratulations for this initiative. Kudos for this initiative, Unity with Immunity, which underlines the importance of not only the unity, but immunity also at this critical hour. I sincerely hope that we shall all be gainers at the end of this program, getting suitably enlightened by renowned experts in the field of health and nutrition. Various myths, if and buts, which very naturally get floated with such times, need clarity. We all must replace fear with knowledge. For that, saying good luck and best of effort to the organizers in general and elite panelists in particular, I hand over these reins to Dr. Nandakishore Dukkapatti to spearhead today's interesting session so that we all remain sensitive to the cause and immune to the prevailing infections. Stay happy, stay safe, and immune, and empower healthier lives through nutrition.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chaube. Uh, Spoken beautifully as always. And yes, I have to thank the entire Nestle Health Science team for coming up with this initiative. When they first presented it, I thought it was one of the most important things that is a need of the hour for our nation. Um, Education, and also to enhance the right kind of information among people and doctors and everyone else out there who are probably being troubled with a lot of misconceptions and different ideas that are being projected on them with various things like social media and WhatsApps and whatnot. So before I dive into the topic as such, I would like to thank the Nestle Health Science team who are working tirelessly in the background, especially Mr. Abdul, Dr. Nikhil, and Zubin. Thank you all very much for conducting this and assembling this wonderful team of panelists for me to have this excellent event this afternoon. Um, and I'm sure that with the knowledge that we're going to impart it from these three panelists, it'll be very, very important for people to gather the right kind of information. So, without further ado, may we have the panelists on the screen, please? So, good evening, everyone. Dr. Bhuvaneshwari, Dr. Radha, Ritika, Samada, how are you? So, great to have all. Wonderful. Great to have all of you here today. And it's an immense, it's a pleasure and it's a privilege to have such learned people who are heading your own divisions of nutrition in various cities in Chennai, Hyderabad, Delhi, and today what we're going to try and hopefully we can try and address is that there are a lot of myths that are floating around, a lot of misconceptions, thought processes that are being shoved down into the throats of people on the social media, etc. I mean, there are a lot of myths about nutrition. The people are talking about supplements. Some people are talking about taking high protein diet. Some people are talking about continuously sipping on hot water and taking these supplements that would potentially prevent the viral infection. And a lot of things are happening today, and people are thoroughly confused as to what to believe, which one is more accurate, and hopefully, which is a good thing to follow. I think this is a juncture where we are, and I think you three are the best people to try and hopefully clear what's happening, the confusion that is happening in the country, and hopefully we can get some resolution by the end of this panel discussion. And I welcome you all.
Thank you.
So the first discussion we're gonna, as we are talking about the immunity, I would like to invite Dr. Bhuvaneshwari to please take on this question. Is that there's a lot of myths floating around immunity. A lot of things they say that such and such a thing is good for immunity. This is bad for immunity. This will boost the immunity. A lot of myths and misconceptions. Can you try and help us in clarifying those, please?
Okay. Thank you, doctor, for your question. Immunity, all of us definitely need. When we are trying to protect ourselves from external factors, we need to enhance our own immunity too. What are the different ways of enhancing our immunity? First, we need to understand that overnight, nobody can increase their immunity. It cannot happen within a week. It cannot happen within a month. Actually, our best lifestyle, overall lifestyle, only can change the immunity in our body. First is the best balanced, nutritious diet, hygienic practices overall, which we need to follow always. Next is regular physical activity. Then another very important thing is a good sleep. Sleep also gives us a lot of immunity to our body. So we need to understand, just because somebody says you start taking this from today, your immunity will increase, it cannot happen overnight. The next is our gut. Our own stomach has got so many microbes, good microbiome. So we have to learn to enhance these microbes, increase these microbes by taking good food, a healthy diet, clean diet, which is prepared under safe, with all safety precautions. Otherwise, we'll end up spoiling our gut too. So, There are many foods which I'm not going to in depth tell now. Probably in your next few questions it might come. So I'm not going in depth. So we can support our immunity more than boosting our immunity. And if we have not done all these all along, we have to learn to do it now. This is the best time all of us have realized how important our health is to us, our good habits, how it matters to us. So we need to learn to support our immunity. Since you mentioned the word about supplements, I would like to alert people by telling do not get into taking supplements which are not scientifically proven. That's not going to improve your immunity. Definitely for our gut, prebiotic and probiotic are good. I think I would like to stop here. Probably we can go on later if you have more questions on the same.
Yeah, absolutely. It's well put. Actually, I think immunity is not something you can boost it overnight. It's not like an injection in the arm and immediately overnight you get an immunity to fight any kind of viruses or bacteria or whatnot. Yes, it should be inculcated within a person of good hygiene, good eating habits, good physical activity, and appropriate sleeping habits. I think all these things put together will give us adequate strength to fight these infections and give you that appropriate immunity. So very well said. And Dr. Radha, let me ask you this. So we know that immunity changes as we advance in age, and also as we advance in age, we pick up various health conditions. Could be like what we deal with on a daily basis: obesity, diabetes, hypertension, cholesterol levels, multiple other health conditions. So, how do you feel the immunity correlates with the change in age and the comorbid factors that are happening in the way you see it?
Thank you so much, Doctor. Immunity is affected, and it's a known fact to many of us that as we age, our immunity does reduce. But there is a certain amount of population where, if they have stayed healthy for a long period of time, their immune system is much stronger than those whose nutritional status was not good. So that's one thing. Another thing is, as we age, the immune components in our body, like the T cells, like the B cells, begin to reduce in numbers. So there is a little immune compromise that happens, but that can be corrected with diet as we age and with physical activity. Added to this, if we have certain amount of metabolic disorders like obesity, like diabetes, hypercholesterolemia, or cardiovascular disease, these are all inflammatory conditions which reduce or pose a challenge to our immune system. Being obese and in the elderly, when your immunity is slightly lower than somebody who's normal weight and the same age. So these are things that we have to really take care over the years to correct our gut, which is the largest immune organ, and stay healthy, and also not have any of these metabolic disorders or keep them at control so that your immunity is much stronger. With the recent infection that has happened globally, if you see the case fatality rate or the mortality and morbidity that happens with age increases. If you see in young children, it's negligible. If you see in adults, young adults, it's about 1%, the global data that shows. And if you go to 60 years, it has increased to 4%. If you go to 70 years, it's gone to 9%. And if you go 80 years and above, it's gone to 18% of case fatality rate. So this is how age affects our immune response to infection. And that is one most doable factor that helps in maintaining our immunity.
Right. Very well said. Essentially, as we age, I think our muscle mass comes down. We tend to gain weight in the less desired areas. The apple shape, the truncal obesity leads on to us picking up various conditions, metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes. So naturally, it makes us sort of go low on the immunity and then probably more prone for conditions. So I think as Asians and Indians in Asia Pacific zone, we're also seeing that there's a higher incidence of obesity and diabetes combination thereof, which is a diabesity, and it is also making people prone for infections. The whole obesity, diabetes, and leading to infections. So, Ms. Ritika's mother, this question would be for you. Is that so? Let us say, why do you feel that the Asians and Indians in general actually are more at risk for obesity and infections and all the comorbid conditions? What is your take on that?
Yeah. So, as rightly said by Dr. Bhuvaneshwari and Dr. Radha, that yes, the adult age and obesity in general would have a major impact on the immune system, right? So, before just talking about obesity and how is it linked to immunity, one thing which I wanted to, just for the viewers to understand, what is the immune system? So, there are two types of mechanism which we have inside. So, one is of course your innate one, which is your immediate reaction to any kind of pathogen or kind of organisms or toxins. So these are your, for the common man, it's your neutrophils or your, macrophages, etc. Now, the other one is your adaptive immunity, which is the antibodies, so which is basically your B cells and T cells, as Dr. Radha just said. So yes, when we talk about obesity in general or diabetes in general, we have seen that there is one less amount of all your B cells and T cells for sure. They are more prone to infections because the number of macrophages are much less. And of course, we know there is excessive inflammation, whether we are talking about diabetes or we are talking about obesity. So these are the reasons why that obese people in general, with the same kind of nutrition or probably the same environment they are in, they would be more prone to a particular infection, whether it's a bacterial infection or a viral infection or a communicable infection for that matter. So that's one reason. And also, as you just said, that why Asians in particular, I think one of the reasons we know for sure that even at a lower BMI, we are more prone to the chronic lifestyle disorders, be it diabetes, hypertension, and heart disease. And again, these are so specifically when somebody has a hyperinsulinemia or a altered glucose metabolism, we know that these people are obviously have a reduced immunity, they have excess inflammation, and that is again one thing which is attacking against your immunity. So if you see, it is both the immunity is low and you are prone to more inflammation. So that's the reason obese population in general are more prone to any kind of infection when we're talking about. And in particular, there are a lot of studies to say that specifically when we talk about respiratory ailments, the obese population is more prone to that. And that's for the simple reason that T cells and the B cells, which is your lymphocytes, are much less as compared to a normal healthy population of that same age.
So, Ms. Ritika, let me ask you this. I know that there's a body mass index classification available for Caucasians and Indians. There's a slightly different. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, so generally for the general population, if you see the WHO guidelines, it says that 25 BMI, we are absolutely healthy and fine. But when we talk about the Indian population, we are looking at about 23.5. And when we are looking at obese, that is the class 1, class 2 and the class 3, it actually talks about 25, 27 and 30 in respect to the WHO guidelines, which is a little different. So remember, for the same height, an Indian or an Asian has to be a little less in weight as compared to the Americans or the Europeans.
So we have more body fat content. So at a lesser body mass index, we are at a higher risk for various health problems, right?
Yeah.
So while
of course, we talked about the BMI. The second is, of course, we talk about the fat and the protein mass. So that is very, very important. Even a person with the same BMI, whether it's a 23 or a 25, the 25, the percentage of the fat is something which is very, very important. And as Asians and Indians, the percentage of fat is much higher as compared to the same BMI of an American or a European. So that's the reason that we Asians and have to have all these kinds of the degenerative or the lifestyle disorders at a much lower BMI as compared to our counterparts.
Sure. As the definition of obesity goes, it's the percentage of fat, not really the true body mass index that matters. So while I have you, Ms. Ritika, let me ask you one more question, and then I'll move to the other panelists. Is that, let's say there are so many household suggestions to so-called boost your immunity. A lot of vegetables, a lot of spices that we use, a lot of flavoring agents, different things are there. People also talk about having to drink hot water, keep drinking water, keep your throat moist. So a lot of things are happening. A lot of grandma suggestions kind of things. So can you shed light into that as to what all the different things you've heard, and do they actually matter? Are they really good? Do they hold any water today? Can you suggest on that?
So, as Dr. Bhuvaneshwari had rightly said in the opening sentence, that first and foremost, we should be very, very clear there is no food which will boost your immunity overnight. It's a lifestyle pattern or the lifestyle kind of modifications which you have to do, which will probably give you or reap benefits later on in life. But yes, diet does play a very, very important role when we specifically talk about building up one's immunity. It's more like your warriors, like we have the COVID warriors, so we have the diet, the healthy diet or the healthy foods, which we call them the warriors, which can actually help us to build up a better immunity to fight against these any kind of diseases, be it a lifestyle disease or be it your bacterial or your viral diseases. Now, coming to your questions, yes, there are a lot of these things which are going around in the WhatsApp, the Googles, etc. But again, there are authorized organizations or bodies which have come out with these guidelines, and I must say, India has acted very promptly and at the right moment. So we have the Ministry of Ayush, which gives us our own, the do's and don'ts when we talk about the Indian herbs and the spices. There are a lot of research.
Sorry to break you. Could you come closer to the microphone? Your voice is not so audible.
Yeah, okay. So,
Thank you.
so we have our Ministry of Ayush, which gives us the recommendations in terms of your herbs and spices. Again, there are a lot of these researches which have been done by NIN, they have been done by ICMR, which talks about the importance of herbs and spices. So yes, these are very, very good. So there are these 5 pointers which have been given by the Ministry of Ayush, and I think all of us, it's been widely circulated in schools, colleges, institutions, even in places like hospitals, and we are propagating it. So we're talking about all the herbs and spices which are available in the Indian kitchen, which are very, very good. So you need to use it. Second is, of course, we are talking about hydration being a key to build up your immunity. Now, whether you take cold water, warm water, or a general water, hydration is the key. Again, do not restrict yourself only to taking water. You must take a lot of fluids. More so important if somebody has flu or fever, it is very important because you lose out a lot of electrolytes. And whenever somebody has temperature, you tend to be dehydrated very soon. So that's the reason we are talking about hydration being the key to during these times. So hydration is very important. Now, coming back to fruits and vegetables, the basis of all the fruits and vegetables are that they're loaded with antioxidants and they're loaded with the so-called micronutrients. And I think over a period of discussion, we are going to talk about the importance of the various vitamins and minerals. And that is where, when we talk about having lots and lots of fruits and vegetables, is coming from. So yes, the key thing over here would be take plenty of fruits and vegetables. Make sure that they're washed properly and cleaned properly. The second is, of course, the Indian herbs and spices are very good. So please make sure that they're available in your kitchen and you use it regularly in your Indian culinary cooking. And third is hydration, which is very good. Be it warm water, cold water, or general fluids. But in general, make sure that you are adequately hydrated.
Sure. So you're saying that people don't need to stock up on ginger, garlic, and onions, etc. Then. So just take enough, and I think that should be good enough. Yes, you said all the right points. Yes, there's no harm in taking the age-old remedies that have been spoken to from our grandmothers and our grandparents, whichever. And yes, staying well hydrated and eating balanced meal. I think that is the key. Not overdoing anything really, but staying in balance. So even the supplements we will talk about a little bit more. I think somebody is healthy. You don't need to overboard on the supplements and vitamins and minerals more than what you really need. For a person who is deficient in all these things, I think these supplements would help. Otherwise, I don't think they would be of such a great help. Now, one of the macro elements that we always look into, let's go to Dr. Radha here for a moment, is that we look into protein. See, as a nutritionist, as a bariatric surgeon, almost on a daily basis, we talk about protein, right? So there are various sources of protein. There's a certain amount of daily requirement for a healthy individual versus amount of protein that is required for a person who's recovering from a bariatric surgery or somebody who's recovering from a long-term illness. A lot of variations are possible. So in your opinion, So can you elaborate on the various sources of protein that are available today? Daily requirement of protein for a regular person post-op, as well as a person who is struggling with an illness, and also how does a regular individual, get enough protein through their diet instead of taking any supplements? Please take it on.
Thank you, sir. Protein is one thing if you really look into a healthy individual or a normal healthy adult. According to the NI and ICMR recommendations, they say 1 gram per kg body weight protein is the recommended dietary allowance. They initially said it is 0.3, but because majority of our population being vegetarian and for the absorption of the amino acids that are there in the vegetarian sources of protein, they said 1 gram would be correct per kg body weight than taking a lower amount. So this is in sync with the FAO and the WHO guidelines also talking about the RDX. But this goes slightly higher when the individual is hospitalized. It may go somewhere between 1.2 to 1.5 depending on the degree of requirement and the existing nutritional status. And sometimes if there's a major surgery, it may go up even from 1.5 to 2 grams per kg body weight, depending on what is the extent of recovery, what is the risk of malnutrition that the patient would have, and how long would the hospitalization would take for the patient condition. So these are things dictated, it's all individualized. They are done as per the guidelines that are put forth by international and the Indian practice guidelines, where Guna ma'am is one of the authors of the Indian practice guidelines, which has given us recommendations about the protein requirements. This is one, and there are different kinds of protein that can be taken from non-vegetarian sources and vegetarian sources of protein. Non-vegetarian are known to be of high biological value. That means the percentage of bioavailability of this protein to the body is greater when compared to vegetarian sources of protein like pulses. So what they do is, if you can, even milk is a high biological value protein. So it's not necessary that vegetarians don't get enough protein is not the way of working out. They do get, but it is necessary to know that the combination of protein is important. Make a combination of pulses, make a combination of milk and milk products, cereals and pulses, so that you get good quality protein and the bioavailability is good. Non-vegetarian sources are better. But and if the individual is healthy, then a regular diet is advisable with good physical activity. But say a person is hospitalized, depending on the requirement of the protein for that individual, we decide on whether the patient requires an extra supplement or not. This is again individualized, not for everybody. Again, depending on what is their intake. For how long have they been on a poor intake, and what is the risk of malnutrition? What is the existing nutritional status of that person? And then what is the medical condition? All these dictate on whether a supplement can be advised for this patient or not. And again, within these supplements also, we make a choice on what is the quality of protein that is available in these products, whether you take a whey-based protein or an intact protein, and take a semi-elementary protein, different kinds of protein that you take and advise accordingly. There are different pulses, again, make a combination along with an oral diet. Some of them say that you can, they are over vegetarian, so you just give them a vegetarian diet with egg, where egg is a good source of protein, bioavailability is also good. Along with that, with the requirement of vitamin D, for example, egg yolk is a good source of vitamin D. So you make a combination of all these and make it available to give a dietary advice to the patient.
Right. I think you're well said. Protein requirement is there for most, especially protein energy malnutrition is one of the major issues that we struggle with in our nation, as it is in most of the generalized population. One thing you said is that 1 gram per kilogram of body weight, the protein requirement for 1 gram per kilogram. So it's a 1 gram per kilogram of ideal body weight, correct? Is that what you meant? So
Body weight.
naturally,
Yeah, I
yeah.
actually forgot on that answer.
No,
If
no.
the
So
person is obese or overweight, then the recommendations change or the weight calculations change. So it is ideal body.
yeah. So what Dr. Radha is mentioning is that if somebody is 5 feet 10 inches, their ideal body weight is 72 kilos. Then they should be taking around 65, 70 grams of protein. But if their current weight is 130 kilos, you should not jump into taking 130 grams of protein. So it is mainly for 1 gram per kilogram of ideal body weight. And you
Or
also raised the
adjusted body weight.
that also. And then you also raise an important point. Let me take it to Dr. Bhuvaneshwari. He talked about bioavailability of the protein, right? So we have a lot of sources, like you just mentioned. So there's the whey protein, there's casein, there's egg, there's soy, there's peas. There's a lot of sources of protein available today. And commercially, people are getting bombarded as to which protein powder is better. Somebody says it's 100% whey, 100% this, 100% that. And if you go to any of these bodybuilding places or the nutrition supplement stores, you'll see these 3 kilo, 4 kilo big protein containers that the moment you see it, you feel like you want to buy it because it is promising these big muscle mass, and they have this bodybuilder on the as a picture on the container. So it's very tempting. So given all these sources and I'm sure they'll have various modalities and availability in the body and absorption. So, Dr. Bhuvaneshwari, please comment on that various types of protein and various sources again, a little bit, and then also their availability, bioavailability once you take such proteins.
Of late, there's a lot of importance given to proteins, even by general population. It's welcome. But they fail to understand that protein, unless you take enough carbohydrate or calorie sources, if you take only protein, it's not going to help you at all. Protein will be utilized for energy purpose. First, I would like to tell you that, and then the protein is there from various sources. Number one is whey. Number one, the top in the list and the best is whey protein, no doubt, because it it has lactose, but it digests very quickly. Okay, and it is rich in branched chain amino acid, leucine, which is very important for building the muscle mass. So when you look at all the protein sources, topmost bioavailable protein with a very good protein score. I don't want to give a technical name to it. It's called PDCAA, which is too much to remember. But that's the best source of protein one, which is easy. Like you feel full when you take whey protein. So even in weight reduction, taking good amount of protein, you end up taking less fat calories or less carbohydrate calories. Third, it makes you feel full. Overall, protein itself makes you feel full. Whey protein stands out in that. The next is casein. It is again milk protein. So for vegetarians, if you're not consuming any animal foods, whey and casein are from animal sources, but it's a vegetarian source, but not a vegan source. Vegans don't even take milk. So casein stands next. It's from milk. It is also digested, and it is digested and absorbed slowly. There are people who take it at night. Post workout at night, they want slow digestion, but it is lesser than whey. If you look at the bioavailability or the quality of protein, it is next to whey protein. Next is egg. Egg is an animal source of protein. I'm not going to talk about chicken or fish, but since we are talking only about protein, I'm talking about egg protein. It's mainly albumin. Egg white is higher in protein. It is a complete protein with all essential amino acids. Again, when one takes an egg protein, they feel quite full, and it has lesser leucine compared to whey. Though we call egg as an animal, good animal source, it has next to whey only we can say. It's a good choice of people who have this milk allergy or lactose intolerance. Egg protein is suggested. Next one is pea protein, the protein from the pea. We all know as a vegetable, pea is high in protein content, but we need to understand the quality is definitely lower than the above three, where next is casein and next is egg protein. It is definitely absorbed slowly, but it is rich in branched chain amino acids. I would suggest the best combination should be more of whey, a little bit of casein. That would be a better combination. Of course, peas can be taken as one among the vegetables. When you choose vegetables, if you add peas, you end up getting some more protein from the vegetarian source.
Definitely. So the whey and the casein are the winners, and I think other things are not too far behind. But I think a mixture, a combination of all these is probably the best way to go. We are still talking about macronutrients, Dr. Bhuvaneshwari. Let me just ask you one more question on this. So we address the protein, and a lot of times, especially in a period like this, lockdown period, where people are gaining weight a little bit and they want to lose weight, and a lot of people would be going into these diets which are like completely devoid of fat. They'll say, okay, fine, I'm not eating any fat, or I'm not taking any oil, or I'm going to take off the carbohydrates. So what do you say? I mean, these are the people that may lose out on the essential fatty acids, the required carbohydrates for certain functions of the brain, blood cells, whatnot, and also going down the road, you may even have certain vitamin deficiencies because there are some fat soluble vitamins. So how do you and each one of them, the carbohydrate, fat, and protein, have different caloric value per each gram or per 100 grams. So how do you suggest in the macronutrient segment a balanced meal for a person who wishes to maintain an appropriate body weight in such a period where physical activity is rather limited?
Doctor, I don't agree physical activity will be rather limited because now we don't have our helpers who had been doing. Since we start doing that, we do physical activity. Second, if you're a person who routinely walk or routinely squat or skip, do something what best possible. If you're a person who had been walking every day, minimum half an hour, 45 minutes, if you do not walk, you feel very tired. So there are ways and means of doing it. You can do it on the terrace. You can do it in your garden if you have an independent house, or you can do it in your balcony or inside your house. There are so many physical activity you can do, even calorie burning. Number one. Number two, cutting down on any one micronutrient is not at all good because every micronutrient has its own plus. Yes, you need to cut down the overall calorie from fat and carb. You can reduce the carbohydrate. When you take enough amount of protein, your hunger comes down. You can bring down the carb quantity, but definitely do not stop. Same way, oil quantity minimum, or rather I would say optimum can be 4 teaspoons to 5 teaspoons as oil. We also have to remember that fat is there in every food. The percentage of it is different. So high fat food, fried items we should avoid, and cooked food with minimum oil. We do need these fats for the good vitamins, fat soluble vitamins which are vitamin A, D, E and K for its absorption. Same way we need carbohydrates for the B vitamins. For carbohydrate to get absorbed, you need B vitamins. Every vitamin mineral is attached to a macronutrient, and every macronutrient is important. So there is no need to stop fat or carbohydrate. It's only balancing act. We can increase the protein, definitely it's very good. Add on activities.
So balancing the protein, carbs, and your fat is ideal, and definitely very well said. And I think caloric value wise, I think fat gives you the maximum amount of calories per gram versus protein gives you the lowest amount of calories. So once we're done with the macronutrients, let's dive into the micronutrients. Ms. Ritika Samadara, let me come back to you on this one. We know that there's a lot of information out there today about vitamin C, vitamin D, and that they will be the sort of they help you build your immunity, and they're and also a good way to get them naturally. At the same time, there are a lot of sources available today to immediately boost up the vitamin D or C, etc. Can you address the micronutrients and with little extra interest on the vitamin C and vitamin D, please?
Yeah. So, as we were talking earlier, when we talk about the immune system, we talked about the Indian herbs and all, and the other category is your vitamins and minerals, which are considered to be immune boosters. Now, when we talk about the vitamins, it is basically your A, C, D, and K, which and of course E, which is very very important when we talk about your. Am I audible? Yeah. Okay. So
Now
when we
better,
talk
thank
about
you.
vitamins, yeah. So when we're talking about vitamins, it is basically your A, C, D, and E, which is very, very useful, and of course, a certain amount of B6 and folic acid, which has been found to be very, very important to boost your immunity. But specifically, we're going to talk about A, C, and D, which is very, very important. Again, when we talk about A and C, it mostly comes from your fresh fruits and vegetables. So it is again very important that all of us have a good amounts of fruits and vegetables. Now, when we talk about a normal RDA, I would say just having a glass of nimbu pani or just having one amla meets your RDA. So when I talk about 30 to 60 milligrams of vitamin C, which is my RDA, I do get it from just a glass of nimbu pani. But remember, when we are talking about vitamin C, it's a water-soluble vitamin C. Hence, you really need to take a good amounts specifically to build up on your immunity. Specifically, if somebody has a viral or a cold and cough, then the requirements are almost 10 times of the normal recommendation. So when I talk about a person who comes with a flu or a fever, just having a glass of nimbu pani is not enough. The recommendations would that time be somewhere about, generally we recommend around 500 milligrams of Lim-C. That has been recommended to a person who is down with fever, right? But for the healthy population in general, you really can't count your milligrams of vitamin C and A vitamin. So in general, if you're having about 5 servings of fresh fruits and vegetables every day, you should be able to meet your vitamin C requirements for sure, right? And of course, we know the citrus fruits are very good. Your amlas and nimbus are excellent sources. Now, coming to vitamin A, again, we generally get it from beta carotene, which is usually your fruits and vegetables. So, any fruit and vegetables which is colorful, like your papaya, the mangoes are in season, and this is the best time to have your mangoes and get loaded with beta carotene. So, those are the best form of beta carotene. But if you want the preformed vitamin A, then dairy products are very good. Again, during this time, the lockdown, we are all inside, and most of us are a lot dependent on the dairy products, especially your lassis and dahis. It's a good source of, in addition to giving you your proteins, it will also give you good amounts of vitamin A. Now, coming to vitamin D, very interesting. I was going through a lot of research, and it does show that there is a direct correlation. One, that generally so we know for sure that there is a correlation between obesity and reduced vitamin D. And when you further deep down and study, get into the studies, there are actually a lot of information and a lot of research articles to state that a deficiency in vitamin D makes one, specifically the obese population, more prone to respiratory ailments. So if you have a vitamin D deficiency, you are more prone to respiratory infections, especially caused by bacteria and virus. So it is very important that we all make sure that we have ample amounts of vitamin D. In case we are very, very deficit, the diet might not help you. You would require a prophylactic doses. But if you have in the range of the normal, which is like a wide range above 30 nanograms per DL, then you can probably go on to have the natural sources. Now, coming to vitamin D, there are good sources of vitamin D available. One, besides your sunlight. So you have most of the milks nowadays are fortified with vitamin D. So please have your milk, especially the Tetra Pak ones are all fortified with vitamin D. So make sure that you have your fortified milk, which has vitamin D. Mushrooms, for the vegetarians, mushrooms is a very good source of vitamin D. So you can have mushrooms. And of course, in the non-vegetarian categories, you do have eggs, which I recommend to everybody who's a vegetarian. Please make sure that you have one egg a day, and make sure that you have the whole egg with the yolk, because you're losing out on a lot of benefits when you miss out on the yolk. So it's not only the vitamin D, but also your calciums and biotins and a little bit of iron which is available in the yolk. So always make sure that you have the whole egg with the yolk. And of course, you have the other fishes, which are your fatty fishes, which are not so regularly consumed over here, but the ones who are having your tunas and salmons in the tin form and all would get the certain amounts of vitamin D. So these are from your vitamin D. And of course, we have a long list for your minerals like your zinc and selenium and magnesium, which are very, very important. Again, freely available from our diet. So if you take a keen interest on what you're eating and make sure that you include a variety of foods in your diet, you would get not only your macronutrients but all the micronutrients, which are very, very essential to make your diet complete and balanced.
I absolutely agree with you. I think especially the point about vitamin D now being associated with various conditions and obesity, and it is so important that in post-operative, after a year, 2 years, 3 years, if somebody is regaining weight in our patients who had bariatric surgery, one of the first things we're doing these days is taking the vitamin D level. It is correlating very well with the weight regain, and then when you supplement them, they're tending to lose weight. And also, vitamin D, while it is related to attributed to respiratory conditions, it is also correlating with depression. Where there's a low vitamin D, there's a higher incidence of depression. Depression is a vicious cycle. It leads to unnecessary binge eating, and then leads to weight gain, and one leads to the other. So, and another important point you talked about eating whole egg. Absolutely agree with you. Only thing for the audience, one important factor is that when you look at the yolk, if it is nice and yellow, it probably is not the best of the yolks. But if it is nice and orange, it is the best yolk to have because it is loaded with vitamin D. So you want to, if you have option to get a country egg, that probably is a better option than a farm egg. I think so. And what do you? And let's move a little bit of gears from Ms. Ritika back to Dr. Bhuvaneshwari for a moment here. To continue with the topic, what we were just talking about, we briefly touched base on the weight management during this particular period. See, the tough times. Everybody's on a lockdown. What we were able to do earlier, we're unable to do today. So naturally, the lockdown started off like a big party. So it is like a paid holiday. Everybody's staying home. Some people are enjoying alcohol. Some are enjoying the new cooking skills, and they're on the Facebook with the new items and dishes that they've cooked, so on and so forth. Now it is coming to a stage where people are bored. They want to get out, get back to their normal lives. They probably ran out of shows on TV now by this time. So in this situation, people are gaining weight. So, what would you, like a few bullet points, take home points for all the audience here? What would you recommend in terms of how do you limit the amount of calorie intake while maintaining a balanced diet? And the lifestyle, what would you suggest? And also, as you know, once you gain weight, as we just talked about, the immunity levels tend to come down. So, we don't want to lose on the immunity. At the same time, we don't want to go on a crash diet because crash diet again makes you less immune. So, how do you strike a balance? Can you give us some take-home pointers, Dr. Bhuvaneshwari?
Number one is healthy cooking. As you rightly said, this is not a holiday time to enjoy your food or alcohol. If you see the supermarket, the first shelves which got emptied were the chips and chocolates and biscuits. Because people are at home. Quantity, that is portion control, is a must. I'm not telling nobody should take it, but don't binge eat because you're bored. There are enough things we can do, we can learn. We need to do physical activity, calorie burning physical activity. So my main take home message would be cut down, portion control is a must. Learn to eat healthy, learn to cook healthy, do physical activity regularly. Do not think it's a holiday to enjoy a meal or oversleep. Sleep is important, but not doing any activity and sleeping will definitely make you gain weight. And we can trim down a little on carbohydrate, increase the protein, you might feel fuller quickly.
Definitely.
I
So,
just add a word, if you allow me. whatever madam said, added to that, if you have to put everything, each of your meal on a plate format, which Enhan has actually propagated to everybody, it's very easy. Half your plate should be full with fruits and vegetables. It could be in the raw form, it could be half cooked, it could be steamed, it could be in any, but half your plate. Quarter your plate should be protein foods. It could be your dal and a combination of dal, curd, and egg or non vegetarian food. And quarter, that is 25% of your plate, can be carbohydrates, especially focusing on whole grains and whole pulses. So this would make it more easy to follow for all of us, where you get a balanced diet, but you get everything in a plate form.
Yeah, definitely I agree with you. Since we're talking about plates, let us just talk about another different plate. Is that even if you serve a large quantity of food in a bigger plate, it looks small. Whereas if you serve a small quantity of food in a smaller
Oh,
plate, it still looks big. So
yes.
definitely that is a little trick. You can trick your mind to kind of do that. So if let's just go to Ms. Ritika Samadar for a moment, Dr. Radha, just a moment, and see to continue with what Dr. Bhuvaneshwar was just saying and Dr. Radha just added to that is that see there are a lot of low calorie diets one can try. See, let us say we're now talking about a person who's been locked down for about last 30, 40 days, for example. Now they've gained weight. Now they have to lose that weight before they get back to work. Otherwise, the IDs won't match their faces, right? So how do you suggest that these people, what kind of a low calorie diet they can employ? How do they lose that excess fat? Here is the catch: lose the excess fat while maintaining their muscle mass, not losing the muscle. What kind of a tips and tricks can you suggest?
Yeah. So very, very important that when we're talking about weight loss, it's not the amount of kilos which you've lost standing on the scale. Ideally, when anybody comes to my clinic, I don't even weigh themselves, weigh them. I tell them to do their body fat analysis and tell me the percentage of fat they have lost and the amount of muscle they have gained. That is what is called as a healthy weight loss, right? And not only in terms of the weight which you've lost, but also you would become more healthier in terms of not getting any kind of diseases and all, right? So it's very, very important that while you're looking at weight loss, we are actually looking at not losing the lean mass and just concentrating on losing the fat. So yes, it is, at the end of the day, it is about calorie restrictions. It has to be less of calorie intake as compared to it has to be less as compared to your expenditure has to be more. Then you get into a negative balance, and that's the way you can lose weight. It is very important that you look into the quality of food, and we talked about it a little by the other experts. But what is very important is the proportion of the carbohydrates to proteins to fat is very important. All the three are equally important, but when we are looking at a target-oriented and time-oriented weight loss, we actually look into something which is like a low-calorie and a high-protein diet. Now, when I say to use the term high-protein, please don't mistake me by talking about the Atkins diet and the keto diets, etc. When we talk about a high-protein in the Indian context, we are going from just about 10% of the total calories which the average Indian takes to about 15 to 20%. Even if somebody manages to take 20% of the total calories from protein, I would say that is a huge amount coming in from the diet, which is very, very difficult sometimes from the normal diet, from the normal food which we are taking. So when I say a high protein diet, we are basically trying to improve on the protein. And when I say high protein, it helps me in two ways. Proteins help you to give you more satiety, right? Giving a simple example for the common people, if I have a slice of bread and I have an egg, both have the same calories, both will fill my stomach similar at the first go. But the egg would give me much more nutrition, give me much more satiety, would probably help me lose weight in the long run, vis-a-vis the bread, which was almost the same calories, but probably making me more hungry and probably giving me more deficiency in my other nutrients. So at the end of the day, we are looking into a kind of a diet which will, one, meet my whole macro and the micronutrients, at the same time get me into a negative calorie balance so that my energy intake is much less. Third, very important, is give me my proteins so that I don't lose my lean mass and I just lose on my fat. So it has to be something which is high protein. Now, taking these three things into consideration, we can easily go from a balanced diet which is there available at home, but it needs to be modified. It needs to be portion controlled, because anything which goes a little extra would add on to the calories, the carbohydrates, the fats, etc. Or else we also have the available the various kinds of meal replacers which are freely available across the globe, and those really help us. We do not substitute the entire meal, but usually what I do with my clients is I tell them to replace one or of their major meals with a meal replacer, which gives you your micronutrients, gives you your high protein, and at the same time controls your portion. And the other two meals have to be modified and planned as per your requirement, so the person's requirement. So this becomes gives a lot of variety to the patient who wants to lose weight in a specific time. Make sure that the patient does not have any kind of deficiencies, is very, very energetic, and the most important, which I started with, loses only the fat mass and maintains, or in fact builds on his lean muscle at the end of his weight loss program.
Sure. I think you brought out a very important point, is that the people who have already gained weight and they wish to lose in a healthy manner, definitely the meal replacement programs that are available today, which are low in calories and then high in nutrients, and they give you all the micro and macro elements. I think those are great options. I think some of the commercial companies, they have these wonderful products out there today, which are readily available and can be taken. We replace one or two meals of your day. And another point, I think, what could be made in this particular situation is that there are food that you could eat which are small in size but rich in calories. But there are also food, the same kind of food, you can transform it into large volume but less calories. Let's say if you ate boiled corn, it would probably have a lot more calories, you can eat a lot more. But if you pop the corn, it's a popcorn. It looks like a huge bowl of popcorn, but then it consists of less amount of calories. So eating smart and playing around with your own mind is a little bit of important thing. So we are coming to almost the tail end of our panel discussion. So one last question to Dr. Radha is that it's a burning question that most people will have, and we just briefly talked about with Dr. also. So what kind of physical activities that could be done at home? Let's say we don't have access to gym equipment, we don't have the treadmills or all those things at home. What do you suggest in such a lockdown period? Whereas some of them were already mentioned by Dr. Bhuvaneshwari, but can you add some more activities to this that would help the audience to burn the excess calories?
Yeah, this is a very nice aspect of weight reduction, because, or even weight maintenance, because even though you control your diet, doing a regular physical activity or moderate physical activity will be advantageous in maintaining your weight, or sometimes even weight reduction on a calorie restricted diet. And these exercises which you generally want to do at home because you don't have access to your gym or going out could be something as simple as doing yoga, which is of course not a weight reduction program, but at least tones your muscles and builds your spending capacity. And then you can do something like skipping at home, which is very easy, or you do certain slow jogging in the house. You can't do that jog at one place, or sometimes for a few of them for weight maintenance, you can always do with weights at home, lifting weights, small amounts, whatever dumbbells you have at home, you can always do, or just do at home. And there are most of our houses where we do have an exercise cycle at home. Not necessarily that you should be going to a gym, but then doing on an exercise cycle, or standalone doing exercises at home which will tone up your muscle, or aerobics at home also would be really nice. You just have to put on the internet, search certain aerobic exercises online, and then do the exercise, which would be really great to do at home during this time of lockdown.
Absolutely. So definitely there are a lot of activities you could do at home. It is called regular activities like you're walking, you're stretching exercises, or climbing up and down the stairs. Everything burns calories. If you're bored, go out there, do some gardening, and play around with your kids or pets, walk your pet, do all those things. I think everything burns calories, and maybe you can help your family in the cleaning up of the house, washing the dishes, whatever else. I think everything can burn some amount of calories. Yes, and
So can I just
another
add in one point here?
yeah, okay.
One point here, yeah. So when we're talking about exercises, it's very very important that when we're looking at goals or weight loss and all, you should come. So a lot of people just doing walking and they feel that they lose weight. So I just wanted to put across over here that it has to be a combination of anaerobic with aerobic with flexibility. It's a complete package, and that is where will actually lead to good weight loss and a very good body toning. So even once the lockdown is out, if you're just allowed to move out, doesn't mean doing that half an hour walk is enough for you. You need to do a combination of the aerobic exercises, which is just your jogging or walking or doing cycling at home, with an anaerobic, which Dr. Radha talked about, so your push-ups or taking some weights, and very important is do flexibility. Now that can come from either your yogas or probably just doing aerobic, joining in aerobic classes or just dancing with music. These three combination makes the exercise a perfect regimen for your weight loss in addition to your diet.
Very well said. And I agree. And another thing that's important for us is that along with cardio, if you're doing the like what Ms. Ritika was just saying, running, jogging, etc., doing muscular exercise is very important because if for those people who are interested in the audience who want to lose weight, believe understand this: the most spendy tissue in your muscle in your body is the muscle. The muscle likes to spend a lot of calories. So the more muscle you have, more muscular exercise you do, then you tend to burn a lot more calories than a routine cardio. At the same time, if you're only jogging every day and you're expecting a monumental amount of weight loss, it is not going to happen because your body is very dynamic. It will get used to that activity. So you need to gradually and frequently change activities into various ones. Could be the push-ups, pull-ups, or could be the cardio, could be the cross trainer. You keep changing the activities, and then once you're able to go outdoorsy, then you can even take up shuttle tennis, swimming, various other activities. Confuse your muscle. Muscle confusion will help you burn the calories. If you form the muscle memory, meaning if you do the same activity on a daily basis, you will form muscle memory where you will not burn your expected amount of calories. So that kind of brings the entire panel discussion to the end, and I have thoroughly enjoyed interacting with all three eminent panelists. I think you have cleared so much of air and so much of misconceptions that are floating around thanks to all the social media and whatnot, and people who are overzealous in forwarding these messages left, right, and center. And I thank you all very much. And I have the Facebook is just bursting with questions. Okay, now for the audience out there, we will not be able to take on all your questions, but because there's a lot of overlapping in the question that you have asked. So if I picked a question to ask, that doesn't mean that your question is being ignored. Please understand that there's an overlap, so we're able to ask one question which probably covers yours also. So the first question goes to Ms. Ritika. Back to you again. This is from Ms. Shivani Gupta. She said that Ms. Ritika had said right about the herbs as immunity boosters, and as there are a number of research supporting this. So can you please suggest some immunity boosting food for vegetarians which can be consumed? This is a question from Mr. Josh Sandhu. And also another question, part of that is mushroom a good source of protein? Can you take that on?
So when we talked about immunity, basically three things to be kept in mind. Make sure that you have adequate proteins, vitamins, and minerals. Proteins, vegetarian source, as already discussed, a lot of dals. So you can have a mixture of dals, etc., which are very good sources. The dairy products are there. Mushroom is also a comparatively good source of protein, so you can take that. And in addition to that, we forgot that nuts and seeds are a super food, right? Because it has everything from your good fats to your proteins to all the micronutrients. And for the vegetarians, so the fruits and vegetables would give you most of the vitamins and minerals which we've talked about in depth. So if you have good amounts of fruits and vegetables, have your dals daily, have a good source of dairy products, I think your body has enough good food to boost up your immunity.
Sure. Thank you for that. And Dr. Bhuvaneshwari, it's an interesting question actually from Ms. Roshni Bitawal. What are the examples of existing evidence on nutrition and its relationship with infections and that are important to consider? So can you elaborate?
Yeah, people who are malnourished they are more prone to get infections. The
Right.
term malnutrition is a very broad term. Okay, what I mean here is undernutrition first. Of course, people who are overnourished, like obese, who get into other comorbidities, are also prone to infection, much more than the normal weight individuals. Okay, so it's not good to be very overweight or undernourished, underweight. So malnutrition we should avoid. So there's a lot of connection between nutrition and immunity, definitely. I hope I answered the question, doctor.
I think so. I think so. See, extremes of nutritional status, there is a higher incidence of infection. If you are morbidly obese or if you are malnourished, you have protein energy malnutrition in the malnourished who are like underweight, and obese people have other associated conditions. Both the segments, when you have undernutrition or overnutrition, both of them are called malnutrition, which will predispose us to various infections and health conditions. I think you have answered it absolutely well. And let me ask this question to Dr. Radha. Is that this is a question from Ms. Nina Luthra. What is the role of probiotics and prebiotics with respect to building immunity?
Yeah, the gut, as already told, is the largest immune organ in the body. Keeping a healthy gut would help in building up our immunity, and this can happen with good amount of prebiotics and probiotics. One common thing which is to a certain extent a myth or a false understanding that curd is a probiotic. I hope the others will agree. But then yogurt is a probiotic where you have some amount of microorganisms added to it and you know that it works in your body and it really helps in having a healthy gut. Whereas curd is always dependent on the starter that we add to, unless and until we are taking a real sour curd where it has fermented for a few more hours, and then to a certain extent it may help. But generally, the probiotic curd is not considered, but yogurt, yes. Prebiotics, there are foods like onion, like garlic, which really help us in improving our act as prebiotics to the gut and help in. More than these two, prebiotics and probiotics, you can also think about whole pulses where they contain large quantities of soluble fiber, and the soluble fiber helps in formation of short chain fatty acids in the body. These also act as good building of the microbiome in the gut, and so they help in good gut health for the body. So it is not just about taking these prebiotics and probiotics singularly, but they should become a part of a whole balanced diet. No food is going to work as a miracle for building immunity or acting as an element on its own unless taken as part of a balanced diet.
And wonderfully said. And adding to that is what I'll borrow some from Dr. Bhuvaneshwari, what she said. It is the balanced diet with ample amount of physical activity and a good lifestyle and appropriate sleep. I think those are also the factors that would boost the immunity, just not taking pre and probiotics. And one interesting fact I would like to share with the audience is that there is a thought process that the gut bacteria actually define whether you are prone to becoming obese or not. So we all have that one friend who's a neighbor or somebody who eats as much, probably twice as much as you would eat, and he or she remains skinny. And then we eat one pulka in the morning, one pulka in the evening, and we gain weight. So we're always wondering as to what's going on here. So I think one of the answers is that probably is that the kind of bacteria that is present in the gut, which if it is a um, uh, highly efficient bacteria that processes all the kind of food that comes into the gut, then it'll create the food into calories. It'll put the calories into your body and makes you gain weight. There are some, for lack of better terms, let's call them lazy bacteria. Even if you have this bacteria, it is looking at the food, it's not converting it into calories, and the food is just getting evacuated out. So, in those people with the lazy bacteria, so naturally, I'm very simplifying it very much actually. So, even though you consume a lot of food, you tend not to gain weight. So, lucky for them, because some of my patients say that, doctor, we just breathe and we gain weight. So, it's unfortunate for those people. So going on to the next question, let me take this question to Dr. Bhuvaneshwari, because it's kind of a loaded question actually. Now, uh, we are talking about, just one moment. There's a question about nutrition in cancer patients. So Roshni Pitawal asked, in this COVID-19 scenario, can you suggest an appropriate diet for cancer patients who are at home?
Okay, it's rather a consultation, I could say. Okay. Cancer patients tend to lose weight because because of the disease. Second, their intake will not be very good because of various symptoms. The first comes as depression or taste bud change, feeling of fullness very fast. So I would say whatever they can eat, good quality food, whatever they tolerate, they should take, concentrate on protein again, how much ever they can eat, small frequent meals is much better. Overall a balanced meal which is safe meal. See, all along we never thought of hygienic food. People were ordering left, right and center. Today, with this COVID-19, the hygiene safety measures of food preparation has also come. So, safe food, balanced diet, small quantities, frequent eating. This is what I would suggest. Maybe less spice or spice as per they tolerate.
Yes,
Can I
absolutely.
just add on to this?
Yes, please.
Can I add on to this? Yeah. So, in addition to what Dr. Bhuvaneshwari has said, there's just one thing during COVID-19. The only thing I think we've not done in discussion is basically the hygiene aspect of food, right? And because cancer or anything for that matter, a transplant patient is immunocompromised, they have to be extra careful while getting the fruits and vegetables. Make sure they are washed very, very well and cooked and then eaten. And also another thing is a lot of people are going off fruits and vegetables because of the various kinds of messages floating on the WhatsApp saying that they might be infected with the virus. So again, WHO and ICMR and NIN have put forward the guidelines saying fruits and vegetables are absolutely safe for the consumers to have it, but make sure that you wash it thoroughly under running water or lukewarm water, or use basic things like you can use your lemon or vinegar or baking soda, which have again been given by FSSAI as guidelines to wash your fruits and vegetables. And they should not only be done during the lockdown time, but during the entire year because of the various pesticides and the toxins which are usually present in fruits and vegetables. So specifically for cancer patients, because I get a lot of calls from our patients saying that we've stopped having fruits and vegetables because they are infected with virus and all. So my message to them, please continue having fruits and vegetables, but make sure that you wash them nicely and thoroughly before having them.
So definitely what you're saying is we should not be spraying disinfectants on the vegetables and fruits, right?
And not soak it in soap and water and detergent, which is becoming very common. People have started washing their fruits and vegetables in soap solution and detergents. Again, a guideline has come in specifically from WHO. If you go to their site, it is mentioned, do not soak your fruits and vegetables in detergents and soap because the skin of the fruit and vegetables are porous and this might cause harm to the body later on. So please do not soak your fruits and vegetables in soaps and detergents.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, next question to Dr. Radha. Which oil from Swati Patel, which oil would you recommend in general for health? And is desi ghee a good source of fat? That Can you take this question?
Yeah. There is no specific goodness that you would get from a single oil. Every oil is good provided the quantity is what is to be maintained. It is 20 ml per person per day, which is recommended quantity, and you can keep changing the oil every month. You can change from sunflower, safflower to rice bran oil to olive oil to canola oil. These things can keep changing. But the quantity, no matter what is the kind of oil that is taken, but the quantity control, portion control is what is essential for oil usage. Yes, according to traditional beliefs and our practices, ghee has been a part of our diet. I wouldn't say ghee is not at all good. I wouldn't say it is excellent, but you can use it now and then. But remember the point that whether you use oil, ghee, butter, or anything, your total quantity of visible oil per day is 20 a day. So if you are using, then you have to reduce your oil. If you are using butter, then you have to reduce your oil. So this is what is important.
So, why do you recommend rotating oils? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, that's because the composition, certain kinds of oil contain saturated fatty acids. Certain kinds of oils like rice bran oil and olive oil contain greater quantity of monounsaturated fatty acids. So it is these fatty acids which have to rotate being, and each one of these have a role in our body that you have to rotate these oils which have high amount of saturated fatty acids and low amount of monounsaturated fatty acids, or high amount of monounsaturated and low amount of polyunsaturated each time every month, so that you get a varied kind of fatty acids to the body.
Sure. I guess some essential fatty acids are present in one kind of oil, and the other kind of oil has other kind of essential fatty acids. So rotating that makes probably a little bit more sense there also, right?
Yes.
And what about
fatty acids? Okay.
what about the ghee? What do you think about the ghee?
That's what I said. You cannot totally say don't take. You cannot totally say please take. It is
Right.
win-win situation or like a balance for total
Sure.
quantity of oil, because it contains a large quantity of saturated fatty acids and it may not be considered healthy when taken in large quantities. So you have to have portion control when you are using ghee.
So basically, idea is not to just take only oils or only ghee. Just have a combination of all of those. Yeah, and then the last but
Yes.
one question goes to Ms. Ritika here. This is a question from Ruchika Gupta. Can you suggest if moringa and spirulina are good source of protein? And another combination of that question from another person is that how about soya protein? Is it safe?
Yeah. So yes, your spirulina is a good source of vegetarian protein. It used to be available in large amounts in India. I think about 7-8 years back. It disappeared. But my question is that why do you want to get into that? Because you have other sources. So that's a seaweed, but you have so many other sources which are freely available in India, much cheaper. So even if I want to have my vegetarian proteins, I have various other sources which are freely available and at much cheaper range, so I can take it. But there's nothing wrong in having that. If you want, you can definitely go and have that. The second question was regarding your what was it? I'm sorry.
Soya protein, is it good? Soya protein.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So when we talk about soya protein, there are lots of myths around soya protein. So first and foremost, it's a very good low cost vegetarian proteins for the masses. So yes, it can be taken. The second myth is, that one, it cannot be taken by the men. It causes cancer, or if somebody is in remission, should she, especially with breast, should they take it or not? So let me tell you, the amount which we are taking, even in a general population, is never more than 100 grams in a day. And all research have shown whether a person is on remission of CA breast or is undergoing treatment or probably is prone to cancer, the soya bean has no effects. Similarly, for a man, he is absolutely safe if he is taking about 100 grams of the raw soya bean. But yes, there are certain researches to show that if the levels are very high, like in the case of taking concentrated soya protein powders, men who have been taking it over a long period of time, who've gone on gymming and all, yes, it might have it actually has an estrogenic effect. But for the general population, what we are taking it in the form of soya nuggets or tofu or probably a soya milk once in a while, it's absolutely safe and it's a good source, comparatively lower in price, easily available, but because of the taste factor, most people don't have it.
Sure. I think it's a well answered question. So one final but loaded question, again going back to all the loaded questions to Dr. Bhuvaneshwari, right? So this is a question from Akanksha, right? This is a very thing pertinent to Indian scenario. So she asks, would you please explain the correlation between immunity vis-a-vis poverty, diet intake, and physical effort put in by the people? So she wants it in the context of Indian scenario. So we're looking at the immunity based on the poverty, diet intake, and physical effort.
Okay. Poverty, immunity, diet intake. If you look at ICMR data, the overall calorie intake and protein intake, even in children, in adults, is much, much lesser than what is the requirement. Again, with money in mind, economy in mind, we need to learn to choose the best possible. For example, if you look at green leafy vegetable as a vegetable, it's loaded with calcium, with fiber, with vitamin A. There is no need to buy a costly fruit or a costly vegetable to get vitamin A. You can get. Same way, the same green leafy vegetable seed, Rajgira seeds, are rich in iron, vitamin C, a lemon, an amla. You get vitamin C. So vitamin D is available in sunlight. See, there are rich people who stay inside AC car, AC rooms, but the poor is walking on the sun or working on the sun. And physical activity, they do much more, fetching water, doing household chores for other homes. So I think nutrition need not be a costly affair. Even with less money, you need to learn to choose the best food. If you can't afford an apple, that's okay. Buy the seasonal fruit, what is there? Buy a guava, papaya, when it is available in plenty. So one needs to have the right amount of calorie. If you look at the poor eating, it's more of cereal eating. So even the protein source may be cereal source. If they can't afford to buy milk, they can afford to buy an egg. They can get protein from the egg also. So I understand with poverty, if somebody gets sick, it is more a problem. But one needs to learn the best sources which are economical also. This would be my answer. Second, they should learn to manage good hygiene practices as far as possible, like taking bath every day, wearing clean clothes, washing hands whenever they can. So this hygiene thing, I think it has to be a culture, whether you are poor or rich. That would be my answer about developing immunity. With regard to
Right.
nutrition, choose the economical
Please.
sources.
Yeah.
What is
Radha,
more, information? Yeah. what is more important in this section of population is safe drinking water, because that is going to be the highest risk factor for gastrointestinal conditions, which would actually aggravate the problem of malnutrition among this population. So safe drinking water is most essential, along with hygiene and whatever other points that madam has added to locally available seasonal fruits and vegetables to be consumed.
Sure. One thought I'd like to leave you all with, both all the panelists and the audience, is that we're looking at immunity per se when you're comparing developed nations versus emerging underdeveloped nations. The immunity, since the question is about immunity is actually highly evolved and emerged in the underdeveloped and emerging nations, because we are far more exposed to pathogens, the bacteria, viruses. We live in an environment which is not super hygienic. We don't live day and night in air conditioning. We don't drive around in cars. We walk. So there is a chance. It's a kind of a catch-22. So if you are poor and if you have very poor nutritional status, yes, it will drop your immunity. But if you are not too wealthy, but if you are doing your physical activities and you're actually surviving well in this kind of environment, your immunity actually would be much better than in a highly emerged nation where people are not exposed to a lot of pathogens. So some people have not even heard of certain diseases that we come across. So when they diagnosed malaria in the state of Texas, it was a big news. It was in the newspaper. So because they don't see that very often, whereas thousands of people die every year in our country secondary to malaria, but nobody pays attention to it because we accept it as a norm. So yes, as long as the poverty is not associated with terrible malnutrition, I think in a way it could be a blessing in disguise to boost our immunity, because we are in an emerging nation where we are exposed to a lot of pathogens, the dirt, soil. We still enjoy walking bare feet on the ground, and we let our children play on the street. So these things, they tend to boost the immunity because you're exposed to these pathogens earlier on in your life. So the same thing does not apply to a Caucasian person who's grown up all his life in the city of Manhattan in a high-rise apartment, who when they come to India for the first time, they say, oh my God, there's a buffalo, right? So that is something we see every day. So this is the variation that we observe. I think with that kind of a thought process, I think we should close this session. I sincerely thank each and every one of the panelists. You have added so much to this discussion. I couldn't thank you enough. And thank you all for being here today.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Yes. That should bring us to the end of this panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.